Hey everybody, it's time to talk about everything that happened with Green Lantern in the month of February 2022. Before we get into the comics themselves, I have had a busy month of podcasting, and I want to make sure you all know about it. First, I was on episode number 466 of the LanternCast, where I helped Chad and Mark run down every single lantern from the future that we could find. If you see my video on every lantern from Earth, it's a lot like that, both in concept and in terms of just how many future lanterns there actually are. Seriously, however many you think there are, double it and maybe you'll be close. A lot of research went into this one, so I hope you enjoy it, and maybe you can tell us if there are any characters we missed. Then I came back to the LanternCast for episode 467 to talk with Mark about the Book of Boba Fett, the first live-action Star Wars TV show since the second season of The Mandalorian. If you've ever wanted to hear me rant for an hour about something I don't like, this is the podcast for you. Maybe you liked that show, in which case I am very jealous of you, but I think it's a fun conversation regardless. Lastly, I joined Adam and Donnie on the Emerald Echo podcast to talk about Green Lantern number 11 and the big final battle of this year-long story arc. It was my first time having an actual spoken conversation with those guys, and it was a lot of fun. It can be easy to look at this current run on Green Lantern and feel down about all the things that we don't currently have, but talking with Adam and Donnie helped me to reinforce the fact that there's a lot to enjoy right now too. It's a great conversation that I got a lot out of, and hopefully you will too. Emerald Echo is part of the Multiverse Musings podcast network, and you can find it here on YouTube as Multiverse Musings The Vidcast. And the one I'm on is titled Emerald Echo, Spotlight on Green Lantern number 11 with Dan Kurtzky from Mosaic Comics. So you can't miss it. Okay, so on to the comics. There's not a lot to say about Green Lantern number 11 that wouldn't be a spoiler. Just know that it's a big Avengers Endgame style final battle that is surprisingly filled with a lot of joyful fun, as opposed to the sense of dread and loss that's been hanging over the book for the last year. This issue isn't about missing what's gone or figuring out what's coming next. It's about having fun in the moment without betraying the ideals that got us to this point. I'll have a video review up soon. In the meantime, I highly suggest you see what Emerald Echo and the LanternCast have to say about it. So, I haven't been keeping up with Dark Knights of Steel, the Elseworld story that reimagines the DC universe as a medieval Game of Thrones world. I think the concept is interesting, and Tom Taylor is writing it, so I intend to read the whole thing once it's done. But I have to talk briefly about a revelation from Dark Knights of Steel number 4 that I got spoiled on. So the main antagonist of this series is apparently someone called the Green Man, and issue 4 reveals him to be this world's version of Lex Luthor, who became the Joker after being driven mad by the voice of a Green Lantern ring whispering in his mind. The concept of Luthor plus Green Lantern equals Joker is kind of incredible. It's so out there that I'd never have thought of it, but it makes just enough sense to work. Leaning on the voice of the ring is really smart, and any cracks in the overall idea can be instantly smoothed over by the fact that this is an Elseworld story. Things don't work exactly the same here. I think this series is 12 issues, and if it keeps up this kind of surprising creativity, I might just have to break down and start reading it sooner rather than later. The elusive Justice League Annual finally came out, now rebranded as Justice League Annual 2022 since it missed its original 2021 release date. This is the story that's supposed to lead into the Justice League vs. Legion of Superheroes miniseries focusing on answering questions about the Gold Lantern. And while it's technically true that this annual does lead into that miniseries, most of this issue is a pretty generic time travel story that does have a few interesting nuggets regarding the Gold Lantern thrown in at the end. A man identifying himself as the Lord of Time refers to the Gold Lantern ring as the centerpiece of one of the greatest moments in the galaxy's history, and then begs Batman to destroy the ring if he finds it, as he fades away back into the time stream. The end of the issue shows us what I believe is supposed to be a Gold Lantern ring embedded in a rock in a swamp, possibly the same swamp that Triplicate Girl was found in when she was suddenly sent to the present in Justice League vs. Legion of Superheroes number 1. It was all really vague and honestly not really worth the wait, but hey, at least we got to see Hal Jordan hanging out with the Justice League for a minute. But despite the annual being kind of lackluster, I'm still looking forward to learning more about the Gold Lantern, which is unfortunate, since the book keeps getting delayed. Issue 2 was supposed to be out in February, but has been resolicited for March 8th, which is actually the same date Issue 3 was supposed to come out. And it's in good company, because pretty much everything related to Green Lantern is facing heavy delays all at once. The Human Target number 6 is coming out in March, and based on these preview pages, it's going to give us another hefty dose of drama between Guy Gardner and Ice, before taking a 5-month hiatus to give artist Greg Smallwood the time he needs to finish the second half of the series without compromising on the quality. Based on what he and writer Tom King have said, this seems to be them opting for one big delay in the middle instead of numerous smaller delays throughout the rest of the run. This is less than ideal no matter how you look at it, but ultimately I think this will be a good thing. Human Target is such a good book that I'm in favor of anything that'll let them finish it without having to cut corners or compromise on the quality. There's a long time between March and September, and I wouldn't think poorly of anyone who didn't come back for the second half because they forgot about it or lost interest. It's a big risk to take, and a big ask for the fans. I only hope this decision ends up being worth it. And finally, Green Lantern number 12 has been delayed from March 15th to March 29th. Not only will this issue end the story arc we've been following for the last year, it's also going to set the stage for what the status quo of Green Lantern is going to be for the foreseeable future. And speaking of the future, we got another round of DC solicitations and still no Green Lantern whatsoever, except for Dark Crisis, DC's next big event. The Justice League, and presumably John Stewart, are dying in the April issue of Justice League. Then in May, we have a pair of one-shots, Road to Dark Crisis and Dark Crisis number 0, the latter of which has Hal Jordan on the cover. Then in June, we've got Dark Crisis number 1, with a cover that prominently features Hal Jordan, Jessica Cruz, Simon Baz, and Sojourner Malin among a sea of classic heroes and legacy characters. It's worth noting that every single Lantern I just mentioned has a functional Green Lantern ring, which leads me to believe that the reason we haven't seen solicitations for anything past Green Lantern number 12 is to avoid spoilers. Maybe something big happens in issue 12. Maybe it has something to do with the build-up to Dark Crisis, just like how the death of the Justice League is setting the stage for that event. Now that I've had time to get over the initial wave of surprise and disappointment I felt when Green Lantern didn't appear in DC's solicitations at all for 2 straight months, I now fully believe that the series will in fact be continuing past issue 12, but the content of those issues is being held back to avoid spoilers. I don't think it has anything at all to do with poor sales. I don't think Jeffrey Thorne is being replaced as the writer. I think we're going to find out that there are a number of things DC has coming that were purposely excluded from solicitations for spoiler reasons. I could be wrong, and if I am, I'll admit it, but I don't think I am. Also, if you want to get ready for Dark Crisis, the 4th issue of Justice League Incarnate is about as essential as it gets. It recontextualizes the entire history of the DC multiverse in a way that makes it seem like all of DC history has always been leading up to Dark Crisis, and it really is quite an impressive display of retcon gymnastics that more or less works from a 1,000-foot view, but probably won't stand up to scrutiny of all the details. But either way, even if you don't read any other issue of this 5-part Justice League Incarnate miniseries, I'd still recommend reading issue 4 before getting into the main event in June. And for what it's worth, writer Joshua Williamson says that Dark Crisis won't be focused on reboots or retcons, but rather a celebration of all the generations and legacies that make him love DC characters so much. I've been following him on Twitter, and he says all the right things, so hopefully the finished product agrees with his sentiment. So that's the Green Lantern Roundup for February 2022. If you have something to say about any of these topics, or if there's anything you think I missed, let's keep the conversation going in the comments section down below. You can usually find me reacting to these developments in real time on Twitter, and I'll be back doing another one of these videos in a month from now. So subscribe and hit the bell to make sure you're notified when that video drops. Until then, thank you for taking the time to watch. My name is Dan. We'll talk again soon.